All right, man. It's good to see you guys.
Or
Yeah, it's good
jazz
to see
beard.
you.
Brett, you're
See you
looking
too, Scott.
fabulous as always,
Oh,
man.
thank you. The man of the slightly wrinkled shirt, but that's all right.
Wow, awesome. I
Uh,
like your drop, man. It looks like you're in a bar.
yeah, yeah. Over Christmas and New Year's, I was in a bar in here, so I'm kind of turning over a
Oh,
new leaf for the new year. But yeah, I got
awesome.
all my crap hanging on the wall and stuff stacked up. So I figured if I'm going to have a backdrop, it might as well be stuff I use. So anyway, before Chris and I start fawning over this album and telling you how
Oh man,
fantastic it is, what do you think of it? Are you happy?
I'm too close to it to uh when it comes to the writing and the playing, I don't know, it just sounds like me doing my same old stuff that I always do. Um, I can't really notice any improvement, but I don't know how many of us notice improvement in our own playing and
Right.
writing. But as far as the sound goes, I'd have to say it's a big improvement over the last album and maybe even Vibe Station too, because we've just learned a lot, about engineering, both me and Alan, after doing it for so many times. And every time we do it, we learn something new, something to do, and more not what not to do. This album sounds fuller. Of course, on this album, Archie's playing a better kit. That helps,
Yep.
because this kit sounds really good. And the one on People Mover sounded good too, but not nearly as good as this one. So that makes a big difference in the sound of the album, the drum sound. And we EQ'd the bass a little differently. Instead of adding 100 hertz, which is what we were doing in the past with Romaine, we were adding 50 hertz. And it made the album bigger sounding on the low end,
Right.
and it didn't get in the way of the guitars, because I also boost 100 hertz on my guitar sometimes.
Is
Just
that for
to
just like that low air sort of sound that you
Yeah.
get? Like,
It's real bass, like around 100 hertz. It's like
right.
real bass. It's a little lower than what you'd probably find on the bass knob of an amp,
Yep.
which sometimes can get into the mid-range territory and make it sound a little woofy. So I generally don't like to use bass on any amp. I pretty much turn it off, or on one. You know, I, I heard Jeff Beck say that he did that,
Yeah.
and when I started doing it, I go, no wonder he does this, because the string has more of a voice, and it sounds more like it doesn't ever woof out
Yeah.
and start going, you know. And I hate that, especially on the G string and the D string. I want them to be voiceful. And when you get rid of the bass on the amp, you get a more voicey tone, and then you can just add it later with EQ. I always like add maybe 4 dB of 100, and the more important guitar tracks, like the melodies and the solos, and
Have
that
you ever
helped put back what I didn't use from the amp.
have you ever spoken to John Suhr about that, the way your amps are voiced, and sort of talked to him
They're
about it?
they're all the same. The Marshall circuits, the Fender circuits, the bass is useless to me. I just
Yeah.
doesn't. Uh,
My friend Stuart Fraser that I used to play with, who sadly is no longer with us, but Stuart was always on that, like turn the bass off. Like he used to use, we used mainly small amps on our gigs years ago, and he mainly used like a deluxe.
yeah,
And and yeah, one day we all went over and looked at it, me and a bunch of other guys, and the bass was on one, and
yeah. That's pretty
everything
much where
else.
I put it, on one. I don't
Yeah.
turn it all the way off. I put it just enough, just one or one and a half. It may be also because I turn the tone knob down on my guitar.
Hmm.
On the treble pickup, it's usually never above 5, and on the neck pickup, I usually turn it down to 7 or 8, and that doesn't help either with the woofiness from the bass knob of the amp. If you had your guitar tone cranked to 10, you could probably get away with adding more bass from the amp, and it wouldn't woof out. It doesn't work for me. I need to turn the bass down on the amps to get anything happening.
Did you do away with the tone bleed in the volume on your guitars? Because I remember.
No, I have it, but it's a better version of it.
Oh, okay.
There's the old treble bleed that everybody knows. It's like a cap tied to a resistor just across the two pegs of the volume pot, and that's pretty nasty sounding. It does a good job of, you don't lose treble when you turn down, but it's a fake treble. So it's sort of like it's what's the word I'm trying to find? It's kind of a cheesy kind of treble, kind of not pleasant to the ear. Um, this new treble bleed that John has been using on his guitars, it's that same cap tied to a resistor in the same place, but it's a different ohm resistor. And there's also another resistor going across downwards instead of across to ground, which is telling it how much. So it's more subtle. When you turn down, you really don't notice any change at all. It's just that you lose gain and volume, but the tone does not change. I don't really think they're trying to keep it a secret or anything. I think if anyone wrote to Sir, they'd probably be glad to tell them what they do. I don't think they're trying to keep it secret, but it really is a big improvement over the treble bleeds that stock treble bleed that everybody uses.
I've ended up doing away with those things and just going with embracing the fact that when I duck the volume a bit, it darkens the tone a bit. So
yeah, or you can use a really short cable to your first pedal. Like I found if the cable going from the guitar to your first pedal is around 4.5 feet or 4 feet, you don't really have that problem of losing tone when you turn down. But if you're using a 10-foot cable, then for sure it's going to be the longer the cable, the more you're going to notice it when you turn the volume down.
The album sounds so live. Did you manage to keep a lot of your live stuff this time, or did you still have to do
I
things
kept
at
as
home?
much as I could. I'm not a big fan of my own playing, so I keep what I can. When I did the album, I didn't have these great IRs that I have now. I was using the Celestion IRs, which is all I had at the time. I'm not crazy about those. So I didn't keep that much. I might have kept some utility parts. And of course, when I say I don't keep solos, I have to keep my solos if the guys reacted to them because
Right.
they reacted to it. So I don't really get much of a choice there. I can go in and re-record them for better tone, and I can fix little things here and there, but basically they kind of have to be what they are. Otherwise, if I replace them with brand new solos, the guys would make the guys sound stupid, right? Because
Well,
they're playing along with me and they're reacting to what I play.
Chris and I were just marveling over the solo on Sky Coaster that you take with Archie, and I thought, well, that's just got to be a live take. I mean, the way
Yeah,
you both play together, it's incredible.
it's pretty much that way, especially on a tune like that where I don't really have to worry about the notes I play because there's no key. So there's no such thing as wrong notes in a solo like that. It's just all about trying to come up with some fun rhythms and get some conversation going with the drums,
Right.
with Archie. And we always have a great time when we do that.
Man, it sounds like it. Because I remember that I think on Guitar Wank on the podcast, you were talking about this sort of remote control mic stand or something that you had at home. So
Oh
was that?
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't use it anymore because I don't use speakers anymore. I'm using mainly IRs now.
Okay.
When three of the tunes on this album are done with my real cabinet, and then while I'm in the process of doing the record, I was working with Justin York at York Audio. I
Yep.
sent him one of my Kerry Wright 4x12s. I was really happy that he liked it because you hear a lot of hype about Kerry Wright, and oh, his cabinet sounds so much better than even the old Marshall cabinets. And I was going, well, they do to me, but am I the only guy that thinks that? So here's Justin York, a guy that has every old vintage Marshall cabinet in the world there at his studio. And I was wondering what he was going to think of it. And he wrote me back and he said, I just fired this thing up and this is the best sounding 4x12 I've ever heard.
The Kerry Wright cabs are worth a fortune now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are because Carrie's not with us anymore,
Right.
unfortunately. He was a good friend and a great guy, and I really miss him. And he was an artist, man. He did incredible work. And the fact that those aren't around, though there is a guy named Conrad who runs a company. I can't remember the name of the company, but he was kind of Carrie's apprentice for a while. And he builds nice cabinets. I can't say whether they're as good as Carrie's, but they're very good, and he worked with Kerry for a long time, so I'm sure he learned a lot from him. Kerry's gone, and so I have these IRs of the Kerry cab, and we worked on them for about at least 3 months. He kept sending me I sent him my mic placements. They didn't work for him because the room is different. And if the
Right.
room is different, everything gets thrown out the window. So he had to do his own mic placements and he just kept sending me stuff. And I said, well, look, just do this. Just go from the middle of the speaker and go to the right an eighth of an inch and give me like 10 of those, and go to the left and give me 10 of those, and go down and give me 10 of those, and go up and give me 10 of those. Right.
Amazing.
An eighth of an inch. So I ended up with like a lot of shit to listen to. And it turns out that his up was what sounded like my going to the right on the right
Incredible.
speaker,
Yeah.
because I'm going toward the edge of the cabinet. He's going also toward the edge of the cabinet, but up instead of to the side.
Right.
And those are the IRs that totally matched. And it got to the part where, you know, Adam Stark, right?
No, I
Do you
don't.
know? Adam's a real good friend of mine, but he would come over. We were kind of doing this together as a project, and he was helping me. And we would listen, and we would put the speaker on one track. We would use a loop pedal because, you know, if you play, every note sounds different because you're
Right.
picking it. You can't really make a good test. So we had a really good loop pedal, and we'd play the same thing into the loop pedal. And one track would be the speaker and one track would be the IR. And we would just blindfold, just press the button, right? And then say, okay, which one's the speaker? And we go, that's the speaker. And it's like, nope. Yeah,
So
we couldn't tell.
pass the
Can't hear,
blindfold test. God.
totally passed, and can't hear the difference. So
Well, I
three
mean,
times.
all of us fanboys are going to want these things. Can you get them? Like, can you get the IR?
Yeah. If you go on yorkaudio.com, it's the Carry Right SH signature pack.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Only like 16 or 14 bucks. That's
Jeez,
it.
that's where I'm going
Yeah.
after we finish this.
Yeah, you just need a good reactive load, you know, like the Sur reactive load, and a good IR player, because what I've learned is that IR players are definitely not the same. A lot of them suck. And what they do is the really good IRs are 500 milliseconds. So if your IR player truncates that 500 milliseconds down to 28 milliseconds, it's going to take all the meat out of it and make it sound like crap. Right. So you want to stay away from those. So like Mix IR, that's a really good one. That's the one that I use. And they make a Mix IR 2 that I can use in Mojave. And they make a Mix IR 3 that I believe you can use in some of the later Pro Tools and, you know, Apple's and Windows systems or whatever. And I'm sure there's some other good ones out there too, but you just want to make sure that it'll play a 500 millisecond IR. So Mix IR can play like an 8-second reverb. So it's got plenty of balls. You know, if it can play an 8-second reverb, it has no problem with a 500 millisecond IR.
Exactly. Yeah. That's massive processing. So,
yeah.
You know, the thing I love about your albums is that you treat the studio like an instrument, and you're not afraid to go in there and overdub. Like, I just love the fact that there's so many textures on your albums, and then when you go out live, you play live. Like there are no keyboards on the album, right? Just to be clear.
No, it's just guitar and pedals.
Guitar and pedals. Yeah. It is
few
fantastic.
plugins. You know, there's some plugins from Sound Toys that are really cool.
Yep. But yeah, I just wanted to be clear because it's so deceptive. Like, I got to ask you, the sitar, like you've got a sitar, right? That's not a synth.
Yeah, it's a Jerry Jones electric sitar.
Right.
And
right.
It's a cheap piece of shit. You know, I mean, it was $700, right? And the intonation is terrible. And I spent more time tuning it than playing it because the intonation is so bad and it's really hard to tune. But once you get it in tune, you know, it's a really good sounding instrument for being such a cheap thing, you know, but it has a nice sound. That's just the instrument through the amp. No pedals or anything. Plug it in the Fender and done.
Because it's a texture you use a lot, like, and it really gives your albums an identity to me.
I've loved that sound ever since I heard "Do It Again," Steely Dan.
Right?
You know?
Yeah. I wonder who played that solo. Is it
Denny Diaz?
It's Denny Diaz, is it? Yeah.
Badass guitar solo, man.
He played so many badass guitar solos.
That guy's a great guitar player, man. Yeah. One of my favorite guitar players, and he played such a good solo on that song.
Yeah,
Incredible.
a lot of the stuff Danny did was just years ahead of its time, wasn't it? Like it
Yeah, it
just
really was. It
yeah.
really was. Like he didn't have a big name. He wasn't this big famous guy, but so many of the great Steely Dan solos are him.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
he
fantastic.
wonderful musician.
When you're going to do a new album, like, do you gradually accumulate songs over the course of time, or do you sit
Oh
down and
yeah.
just go, I'm writing, and I'm take the phone off the hook and you just do it?
Well, I mean, sometimes you know how it is. You don't have that luxury because you're touring and you got a busy schedule doing this and that, just living your life, and you write when you have time. This time for me was a little different because of COVID, because COVID gave me like 2 years to sit at home and I had all the time I needed to write. So that was a little bit different because normally I would write a few songs, then I would have to do something, then I'd come back and write another couple songs. But that's what made the difference in this record. And another thing that made a little bit of difference is that, you know how if you ask us about any musician, like what did what happened with you during COVID, most musicians will say, well, I concentrated on a weak side of my playing and practiced on it when normally I might not have time to do that, but because of COVID and sitting at home, I found time to improve myself in some ways. And I think one of my weakest points was the inability to access the harmony that's in my head in real time,
Right.
like instant access. Like I would hear things, but I don't know where to put my fingers to find it. So I worked on that a lot, just basically playing solo guitar, not because I want to be a solo guitarist. I really have no desire to play guitar by myself in front of people. I'm more an ensemble band guy, but just so that I could sit down and play and come up with things quicker, just in real time. So a lot of the music on this record was composed more in real time than other albums that I've done because I got a little better at it. I mean, I'm no Keith Jarrett, that's for sure, but but I got a little bit better at just, you know, hearing what's in my head and being able to find what I'm hearing on the fretboard.
Well, I
And
wanted
so
to
that really helped
when
me.
now that you bring that up, is it Green Mansion? Is that the solo guitar piece on the album?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, like I just wanted to ask you about that. Like it, and that
A
sounds
lot
like
of
it's
that
a stream of consciousness piece.
a
Like
lot
that's
of it is improvised. Yeah,
yeah, that's
improvised. Yeah.
amazing. It
Yeah.
sounded like that, and it's
And
beautiful. It's an incredible
except
piece
that
of
I
music.
needed to learn the melody again, the main melody. I needed to go back and learn that and play it again. But yeah, a lot of it is improvised. So that's the kind of stuff I want to be able to do a little bit more of because I hear Scott Kinsey doing it and
Yeah,
he's so amazing at it. He just sits down at the piano and starts making music. He doesn't need a standard or he doesn't need a tune. He just sits down and starts playing all this incredible stuff.
yeah.
And of course,
Years ago, when TJ and I were doing that album, the Uncle Mo's Space Ranch thing, I had to go.
yeah, I love that album.
I had to go to Kinsey's place one day to drop something off or something, and he said, "Oh, I've just got a new keyboard from Nord," and he just started showing me this keyboard, and I was just standing there listening to him. And when he'd finished, I said, "Man, if you do that for an hour, I'll give you $20, and you can just call it an album because it was just
Dude,
beautiful. It was
I mean, honestly, that's how X came about. You know,
right, yeah, the
I'll give away one of my trade secrets. Um, we were a little bit on, I think that was the innovative side of Tribal Tech when we decided to go in the studio with no pre-written music and just jam.
right,
And I thought, we did okay with Thick. Rocket Science was a little bit better, but I thought X was our best attempt at that. And the reason why is because we didn't all try to play at once. A lot of times we just gave it to Scott and said, Kinsey, you just jam and do your thing with the drums. And then we'll come in and double what you did or add to what you did or whatever. But the catalyst of that record is Scott, is
right.
Kinsey. So I think the jams are better and I think the songs are better because we just let Kinsey go and we didn't get in his way. So
Yeah, he's remarkable, isn't he? Like that first Uncle Mo's album, where TJ and I were piling things on top of it. And I know Dennis and Willis just thought, "There's no way in hell this can become an album," and I don't blame them because the demos we gave them were awful, and And yet, when we gave it to Scott, he just glued it all together. Like everything he put on there made it sound like proper compositions. He's just a genius. It's
Amazing. And
brilliant.
he's got that thing. And I saw Zawinul do the same kind of thing so many times when I was working with him. He would just sit down at the keyboards and he'd sit down and in 5 minutes he's written a tune,
Yeah.
like just improvising. And he might not stick with it chronologically. He might take a piece from the end and put it at the beginning, but whatever. He's just improvising, and that's how he writes. And it's incredible. I mean, to think that somebody sat down for 10 minutes and then you have Birdland.
Well, I
Just
suppose he would be,
wow.
because you worked with him for so long, he would be the main influence on you for wanting that stream of consciousness, I suppose.
Him and other guys like Keith, who I've heard do it, like Keith Jarrett, who just sits down at the piano and just plays, and he's not playing a tune. He's
Yep.
just playing right off the top of his head, and what comes out is just incredible. And I'm just inspired by those kind of musicians that can just do that. And I have a lot of harmony in my head, but that's my problem is I can't find it sometimes. Like
Right.
I don't know where it is. I hear it sometimes, but I don't know where it is. But now, after sitting for a long time playing guitar by myself during COVID, I'm finding it a little easier than I was before. And not that I'm anywhere near where I want to be, but I've improved. And that it's rare when we can say that. But after sitting in a year at home with my guitar, if I didn't improve, something would be drastically wrong, I think.
Jesus, man. Well, you found it on this record, but Chris, do you want to ask Scott any questions? I'm gas bagging, so you
No, you're fine.
jump in.
First of all, I think Scott, this I've listened to the whole album. I think it's probably it's probably my favorite stuff I've heard
Well,
up
thanks, man.
to
I
date. I
sure
just
appreciate
so
it.
for people listening to this, like it's some of your best. It's some of your best
Thank
compositions,
you.
some of
Thanks,
your
man.
best solos. So I'll definitely be getting my signed copy. COVID
Uh,
vaccination. I just have to talk about that track because when I first heard that, it's so unique because of the obviously there's lots of overdubbing and things going on. It sounds like
mhm.
like a small jazz big band or something going on with
Yeah,
horns. And there's a very low guitar in there, that's a baritone guitar.
it's supposed to be. Yeah, well, no, it's
Or it's
actually
a D-tuned.
the funny thing is I did try it on baritone. It didn't work
Okay.
because I have a baritone guitar, but when I tried it with the baritone, it was too flubby sounding. It wasn't sharp enough because I think the strings are too big.
Hmm.
So it worked better just to play the low E string of one of my guitars just tuned way down
Right.
because it was a sharper sound and it sounded more like a Barry sax.
Yeah, it really sounds good. Everything cuts through and all the parts that work together. How many guitars were did you track for that? Like approximately
Six,
six.
six. I had a trumpet, an alto, a tenor, a trombone, a Barry, a second trumpet. That's it. Yeah.
I've never heard anybody do it before. It floored me the first time I heard
Yeah.
it. I was like, great.
It took me a while to find those sounds because what I did is sounds so ridiculous, but what I did is I just went on the internet and tried to find samples of solo horns, a guy playing a saxophone all alone and a guy playing a trumpet all alone, and then went through my pedals to see how close can I come to this sound. So the trumpet sound was one of my distortion pedals, I can't remember which one, through a wah wah, not quite closed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the trumpet has this kind of nasally thing
Yep.
happening. And then the were the easiest because they're kind of rizzy sounding and fuzzy sounding. So the fuzz tone was definitely the way to go. So I have several fuzzes. I don't remember which one I used, but fuzz for sax. And then I have this pedal called it's made by Trombetta and it's called a rotobone. And it actually is meant to sound like a trombone because when you play notes on it, it has this warble like a trombone makes, you know, and that worked perfect for the trombone part. And then I don't remember some other pedals for this or that. And then, of course, like probably another fuzz tone, but picking way back by the bridge on a low E string turned down to get the Barry sax. Um, but one of the hardest things was figuring out where to put the horn. So I took an arranging lesson from Tower Power. I got some headphones and I was listening, like this, take the headphone off and like this. And I realized how spread their horn section is. Like the trumpet's way over on the right, far right, and one of the saxes is far left. And they've got the horn section completely spread out left and right. So that's what I just copied them. So
Is that a bigger section than the one you were imitating on the track? Like,
well, I don't know how many horns Tower Power had. Was it 7 or 8?
big, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a
Yeah, a pretty big horn section. Yeah.
man. That
So
track,
let's
that
try to
track. I
spread it
remember,
out.
I I got through it. I listened to it, and I was so into it. And apart from the fact I was half the time I couldn't even tell where one was. I'm just completely lost. But that's because I'm an idiot. But at the end of it, it just finally, when the last note finally hit, it actually dawned on me. I went, "There's no horns on this track." I went, like the
Yeah.
sounds are so good and the arrangement is so good that I swear to God, I just totally got swept up in it. And it was not until the end of it I went, "These are guitars." Like I
Yeah.
had to, yeah. It's so
Yeah.
man, it's an
It
amazing
was
achievement. Well
it
done.
was kind of it was hard because it's hard to imitate another instrument. You can only get so close to a horn, but I got as close as I could. It definitely sounds like something that isn't quite guitar because you can definitely hear when the rhythm guitar comes in, it sounds like a guitar,
Right. Yeah.
and then it's like, okay, that's a guitar. But yeah, I hope I got as close as I could. And I also some stuff that I totally stole from Tower Power is the rhythm guitar part is a Les Paul between the two pickups, using both the neck and the bridge pickup because
Right.
that's what Bruce Conte did in Tower Power. So I listened very closely to his rhythm guitar parts, and I've even seen live things on YouTube where you can see that the pickup selectors in the middle,
Yeah.
and that's how he always played. And he got a beautiful rhythm guitar tone. He was such an amazing rhythm guitarist and a great soloist too, because he played those really cool rhythmic solos like in tunes like What Is Hip. And
Yeah.
yeah, just love the guy. And so I just wanted to do right by him and try to get as close to his sound as I could.
It's amazing. I mean, there's some old videos of Paul Jackson Jr. I think it is. You know, the guy that played on all the Michael Jackson stuff and everything. And it's
Other
like
guy, yeah.
'80s instructional video that he did, and he's in the studio just playing some of the most beautiful rhythm stuff. And that's on a Les Paul as well, which is really
Yeah.
unusual. Like
And
for
and,
me,
and
I don't know much about funk, but it's just I
didn't
found
the
that
guitar
interesting.
player for Earth, Wind, and Fire play a 335?
He might have, yeah,
I
yeah.
think he did. I'm not sure about that, but these rhythm guys playing, you always expect them to be playing single coil, a telly or a strat, and they're
Elliot or
playing
Strat, right?
humbuckers, right? To play rhythm guitar. Interesting, but he's another guy, I don't know his name, but the guitarist for Earth, Wind, and Fire just played some incredible rhythm guitar stuff. And the guy who replaced me in the Zonal Syndicate, Gary Paulson,
Yeah, I've seen him.
man,
Yeah.
holy shit, can that guy play some incredible funk
I've
guitar?
got a live concert of the guys that band and he's just rhythm all the way. Yeah, I don't think he takes one
Is
solo. I think it's just
impeccable, man.
and it's
He would play
amazing.
these things by himself, and his time is just, I just don't know how somebody could have time that good.
Well,
He's
you know,
incredible. Yeah.
speaking about
And I
time,
love Gary. He's the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet too. He's a great guy.
speaking about time, like I said, during COVID vaccination, that tune, it's like, oh my God. I mean, I'm trying to settle in to where the hell the downbeat is, but I'm lost, man. My God, it's just fantastic.
It's basically the beat from Soul Vaccination. It's that groove, right?
Okay,
So
right.
that's the groove that inspired the tune. And yeah, it is kind of stolen. I didn't steal the melody or anything, but that groove from Soul Vaccination is what inspired that tune. So if you listen to Soul Vaccination, it's almost exactly the same drum beat and not the same bass notes, but the same rhythms that the bass player's playing.
One more thing about the horn parts. Did you like sit down and write them all out and when you're arranging, or was it just to play it in here what I
Well,
wanted to play?
I just took them from because we've been playing that tune on the road. and I just play it normally with chords. So I just took each chord tone and made it a horn part. You know,
Excellent.
that like the E string became the trumpet, and the B string became one of the saxes, and the G string became another, like that.
Excellent.
I was saying that to Chris earlier. Like the thing I love about your albums is that you're in the studio and you just treat it like a canvas, and if you want to overdub stuff, you do it, and it creates the most amazing sonic spectrum. Yet live, you go out trio, and it's like what Hendrix used to do, where you'd listen to his studio creations, and they were expansive and overdubs, but then he would just go out and play as a trio, and you do the same thing. Like,
I mean, as long as people can know what the song is, I don't think anybody expects to hear the filled out version
no,
that they do on the record with 20 guitars going on. But we do have a rhythm guitarist now, and also another lead guitarist, because Lena's playing with us.
okay,
So, Lena plays, you know, one of the things that I miss about playing trio is, miss about playing with keyboards is, when you're playing trio, you have to just do everything. You have to play the chords and the melody at the same time. You don't get to be that lead guy anymore.
yeah,
It's just play a singing melody with distortion with chords behind you. And now I get to do that too, because on the songs that Lena doesn't play the whole night, she plays on maybe 5 tunes. But on those 5 tunes, I have chords behind me. So we play some old tribal tech music. We play some of the songs on the album that would be really impossible to play if she wasn't there, because they wouldn't work trio, because the chords really do have to be there. And also sort of a more singing version of the melody than you would get if you tried to play it all at once.
right.
So it's nice
Because
to have.
I saw some, I think there were some advanced dates that are coming up that you're going to be doing, and I noticed there was another guitar player there, so that explains it. So when are you going on? Oh, actually, hang on. What I should get to is when is the album available? When's it coming out? What's the date?
February 2nd, so just 2 weeks.
What's the best place for people to get it from? Because I just want to make sure we get that in there.
Probably Amazon, Amazon, or it depends. I've got 3 versions, 4 versions. You can just buy a regular CD from Amazon. 5 versions. What am I talking about? You can get the regular CD from Amazon. You can get the MPEG 4 version from iTunes,
Yep.
or any one of their digital distributors. I'm sure there'll be more than one company that has it besides iTunes, but that's just the regular MPEG 4, which sounds better than an MPEG MP3 for sure,
Yep.
but not quite as good as a CD. Then on my website, you could get an autograph CD for $20, or you can get the 96K version, which sounds the best, and that's also $20. And that's just, each song is a separate file, but if you put them together just right next to each other in your DAW, you get the same space between the songs as you would hear on a CD.
Ah, cool. Okay.
Yeah. If you just like crunch them up against each other in your DAW, you'd be basically have a 96K version of the CD with the spacing and everything.
Cool.
And 96K does sound better than a CD. It really does. It's not about bass, treble, and mid range. It's about the depth of it. It just, there's more depth. It sounds more 3D.
Right.
It's like, I don't notice it so much. Like if I'm listening to a CD and that sounds good, and then I put on 96K, I go, oh, sounds great too. But if I listen to 96K for a while and then put on a CD, I notice what happened. Like it got more flat sounding, more not quite as 3D sounding, so 96K is cool.
It's a
And
shame that
mastered.
it's a shame that maybe we have too, but definitely younger people, because they've grown up only knowing MP3s,
Yeah.
listening to music in that medium, and they've never really had the experience of not even a CD, let alone a vinyl album on a beautiful
Right.
stereo system
Right.
like my brother-in-law back in the 70s and into the 80s always had a top-notch stereo, and
Yeah.
to hear that cranked up and really hear something like that, whereas you become conditioned to just low-res music, it's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of, especially on an album like this where someone's really caring about the tones and wanting people to hear the tones. And there are many artists like that who really work hard on making the album sound as good as possible. So that kind of gets diluted when you're listening to a streaming version or especially an MP3. Thank goodness that Apple's new format MPEG-4, it does sound quite a bit better than MP3s.
Right.
Doesn't sound quite as good as a CD, but it's not bad. But the 96K is the best, because that's what I'm hearing at my house. And Kinsey also mastered it the same exact way he mastered the 44.1. So you're not hearing just like the raw thing, you're actually hearing the mastered 96K. So it sounds really good. And then the last version is the play along version, which is what I've been doing on Vibe Station and People Mover, where you have stems of the bass mix and drum mix and 4 or 5 guitar mixes, so you can really delve in and either just check out the tracks by themselves, or if you want to play along, you just mute the guitars and play along with the bass and drums, or if you're a bass player, you mute the bass and play along with the guitar and the drums. It's fun.
I don't really know many people that do that, so it's awesome that you do.
I don't either, and I don't know why, because it's really fun. Like you could take a section and just loop it. You put it in your DAW and just loop it and play for hours over it. It's a good practice tool, but it's also like, some of my students are studying making records themselves. They like to see how the layers are put together.
Yeah.
So they get to hear, instead of just one big conglomerate of guitar, they're hearing the separate layers that make up what I'm doing. And I'm interested in that. I'm a big Richie Blackmore fan. So when I found out that I could get, there's a website called tracksforall, I think, .com, and you can get a lot of rock and pop tracks, soloed tracks,
Right.
And so they were offering like 15 different Deep Purple songs off In Rock and the other one.
Machine
the other
Head, probably.
Yes, Machine Head.
Machine Head, yeah.
In Rock and Machine Head. So I got them all. And what I was really blown away by is the fact that just like Jimmy Page, he's doing a lot of layering, but you don't hear it quite as much because they have a keyboard player, and the keyboard player is sort of disguising some of the guitar layers. It's not as naked as Led Zeppelin, where you can clearly hear the different guitar parts. Richie Blackmore's got at least 5 or 6 tracks on every song. He's recording, a lot of times he's recording a really mid-rangey, like how he likes to play the bass lines, like he's going do 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 do, space trucking, right? On the left, it's really the super mid-rangey honky sound with no bass. It's all mid-range. And on the right, it's super bassy and trebly with real scooped sounding, right? And when you put that together, it sounds massive. And he's got them split hard left and right. I would have never known that.
No, they always sounded to me, because I've been a Purple fan since I was a kid, and I mean, they always sounded to me like they were basically tracking live with overdub solos.
Yeah. I always thought he just came in and played one track and he was done.
Yeah.
But he's layering like crazy, and you can really hear it. And I had a lot of fun just like putting those tracks in my DAW and playing them all at the same time to hear all the guitar layers, and it was really fun. And so that's what people can do with this play along version of my record as well. And it's, for fans of guitar layering, I guess it'll be fun for them to do that.
Richie's sound is quite enigmatic, isn't it? Like, I know, it's just one of those things where how is there so much brightness to it yet so much fatness to it? Like,
I've studied this, and I have come up with solution to your question. I have the answers to your questions.
It's going to cost you.
Yeah, I'm just going to give it away, for free. If anybody wants that sound, first of all, you do not use a 57, because a 57 is incapable of getting that sound. Richie Blackmore's got a few albums like Made in Japan, where they put a 57 on his guitar and it sounds nothing like his guitars on the records, because in the studio they were using big fat condenser mics like U47s and U67 on his amp, and they were not putting the mic, well, sometimes they did put it in the cone, but it's a very dark mic, so a lot of times and I'm just trying to it's a hobby of mine to try to copy different tones just to see if I can get them. I don't really find any place I can use them in my music, but it's just fun to see if I can cop that tone.
Yeah.
So I I got the IR I of the speaker that he uses, which is a greenback or sometimes a vintage 30. And then I would put a that big condenser mic on it, turn my tone all the way up on the guitar, and use his pedal, which is the BSM treble booster, which I bought. And it sounds, that's it. I mean, that's
Oh
that
my
tone.
God.
It's the combination of the and the Marshall with certain settings, because you have to dial in his settings. And one of the things that I notice about Richie is not very many of his tones are alike. It sounds to me, in fact, I'm sure of it by listening, that he was always sticking with the tones on the amp. Like,
Right.
hardly two tones are the same on any one song. They're always different. You can tell one song he's got the mid range all the way up, ones he's got it all the way down. You know, on some songs, you can tell he's got the presence all the way up and the treble all the way off, and vice versa. He's always messing with the amp settings. And so that's a learning thing for me, that you don't have to have a signature sound and have the amp set the same way for every single thing you record. You can be a little experimental with that, and hopefully it fits.
I've because yeah, Richie he played a variety of guitars too, and I've always been fascinated by that because I'm kind of a find a guitar you like and stick to it kind of guy. Like I've always been fascinated by Brian Mays and Angus Youngs and people that they've got their guitar and they just play it and they
Yeah.
stick with it for years and like is there any one of your sirs that you go, that's my go-to, that's the one I grab? Like,
I've got one for live and one for recording. The one for recording has more bass than the others, so that's why I use it for recording. The live guitar doesn't have as much bass. It's more of a sort of an even sounding instrument. Sometimes we play these rooms that are so boomy, and if I played my studio guitar in one of those rooms, it would even make the problem worse.
right.
So I I don't tend to go for a really bassy sounding guitar. It's so weird because all my guitars are basically just copies of each other, but the wood is different. So
Yeah.
the
The live
wood
one's the green one. Is that the green one you mainly play live? Yeah.
one is the live one, yeah, and that's the one that I like the most for live. And it's just so funny that they have the exact same pickups, same hardware, but the wood is wood and it's unpredictable. So
Right.
different weights of wood, different densities of wood, it makes them sound different. And that's just a thing.
Because I just when I listen to your albums, like I think you've absolutely nailed that enigmatic sort of sound, which is half distorted, half clean, for doing the complex chord, but still
Yeah.
having the power. Like you've really nailed that. I wonder what's in your
Thanks.
signal chain for that.
That is basically one of my favorite boost pedals. Usually it's the LA Sound Design boost. You probably know Dave Phillips, right?
Hmm.
Dave Phillips has like a line of pedals, and one of them is called the LA Sound Buffer Boost. And it's pretty much like an RC booster, but it's more scooped. It's not, it doesn't have quite as much gain. It's got more bass, and it's really great for chords because it cleans up really nicely when you turn the guitar down. And also, a good guy, Kyle Chase, who runs Chase Tone, he has this thing called a secret preamp. And basically, what it is it's the guts of an old Echoplex, like 70s Echoplex. And if you put that after a boost pedal, it kind of makes it sparkly in 3D, and it gives it a really nice, sweet tone. That I use. So I go into the LA booster and LA Sound Design booster, and then into the secret preamp, and then into the amp. And that's most of the time that's what I'm using for chords, because I'm not really a big fan of totally clean chords
Right.
on a Strat. I mean, they sound great on a hollow body or a 335, but on a Strat they can sound kind of thin.
Yeah.
So my chords are always a little bit dirty, kind of like the Schofield thing, where you don't really hear him playing with a totally clean sound for
No.
chords. that's always a little bit of dirt in there for compression and to make them sustain a little bit more. And I'm kind of more from that school.
That sound suits the vibe of where you've gone musically, like and
It,
compositionally too. Like that.
yeah.
What's the track? Uh, I think it's Haunted. No, hang on. Is it Haunted Ballroom? I think it is. Second
Uh-huh.
track, and it's basically a blues shuffle, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And it's just the thing I love about it is I was listening to it the other day, and I went, if you just played someone the solo, they'd think, oh, well, I know what the rest of this song's going to sound like. It's sort of,
Yeah.
and then when you listen to the way it's bookended with the composition,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, holy shit, what the hell happened here? Like, I mean, it's
Twisted
amazing,
blues,
man.
I
It's like,
guess. Yeah.
it's
It's
just,
twisted blues.
it's just
That's what a
fantastic.
lot of people said about Dog Party. It's like, yeah, the solos are usually over really simple progressions, but the songs usually have a little bit more harmony in them.
Right, exactly.
And,
Yeah.
and that's that jazz influence, just so many years of listening to jazz. And I just love harmonies. So
Mm.
it's hard to write a song that doesn't have harmony in it for me. Because I just like it so much.
Well, when you did that fantastic seminar with Chris about composition and you talked about all the different things you spent time transcribing, like John Williams scores and all the all the.
Yeah, I'm just it's another hobby, I guess. Just when I hear music I like, I'm sure we're all that way. We hear music we like and we want to know what makes it tick. So we transcribe it and we write down the chords and we play the chords on our guitar and sing the melodies and we go, why didn't I think of that? And that's basically the question we need to always ask ourselves is why didn't I think of that? And
Right.
then maybe you're going to come up with something that's original, hopefully. That's what I'm hoping anyway.
Keep going, Chris. You must have another question. So.
No, no, I was just thinking about, I do that with AC/DC a lot. I'm like, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, with any riffs or any, I mean, that's a good example because they've come up with so many cool riffs,
Yeah.
and so has Aerosmith, and so has Led Zeppelin, and all these bands. When it comes to just simple rock riffs, some of these bands have just come up with the coolest shit, and it's like, how am I going to compete with that with all the music that's gone before us? And so maybe it needs to be a little more complex, and I always think I'm not probably going to be able to write a simple tune that someone else hasn't already written. So maybe that's why I have to go into a little bit more complex harmonic areas to try to discover something that's no one has done yet. And I'm not even sure if I've succeeded because
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm subliminally hearing music from other bands in my head when I'm writing.
But I mean,
I'm not
I,
doing it on purpose, but who knows?
I always use myself as the example for this because, I'm in no way, shape, or form qualified to try and analyze your music in any harmonic sense. So it's so far above my pay grade. It's ridiculous. But yet I just love to listen to it, and I just kind of let the sounds wash over me, and I find them enthralling. And that's why I get so frustrated when people refer to anything that's beyond basic pop music as musicians' music. You know what I mean? And I'm like, man,
It doesn't have
I'm
to be.
living proof. It doesn't have to be that. I just enjoy listening to this, but I can't play it. I can't figure it out.
It's just an acquired taste. I mean, you don't have to know anything about harmony to enjoy it. I mean,
Right,
look at all the incredible classical music that's out there by Ravel and Debussy. This amazing harmony that folks love, and they're not musicians. They just
right.
love to listen to it. And I don't think fusion or jazz is any different than that. You learn to love it, whether you're a musician or not. That's what's kind of cool about Europe. Not everybody in the audience is a musician in Europe.
Yeah.
People just
Wow.
like jazz and they like different kinds of music.
Hmm.
Where in America, most of the audience would be musicians themselves. And maybe it's like that too in Europe, but it's just not all. There
Yeah.
are people outside of the United States who, proven by the fact that that's where most of our gigs are, you know, they like hearing music that's not doesn't necessarily have to be really simple like pop or country or
Right.
rock and roll. They're willing to listen to more complex music and they dig it, and they're not all musicians. They like it. But again, they've been exposed to it more than we have here.
Right.
Like you're not likely to hear music like mine on the radio, whereas in Europe you could. So it's different. We have a different culture. We have a different environment. You're not likely to hear a lot of progressive music in the media, in the mainstream media here. But in other countries, you're more likely to hear that kind of stuff and be
Right.
exposed to it.
Is touring the States still cost prohibitive for you at the moment?
Yeah, it's kind of a waste of time. Yeah. Not that there aren't fans here, but there just aren't enough of them to make it worth
Right.
while. Like it costs so much money. That's partly my fault because I think if I lived in New York, I could probably rent a van and throw my gear into the van or our gear into the van and drive up and down the East Coast and play some gigs. But living out in California, that makes it really hard to do because most of the gigs are on the East Coast. So you'd have to
Right.
either drive the van all the way to the East Coast, which nobody wants to do.
Nobody wants to.
Um,
Yeah.
and you'd have to rent gear, which is also more expensive, and the gas is ridiculously expensive. You know, plus my guys live in Paris, so they're all Europeans, the guys that I play with. So to fly them from Paris to New York, it's I'm not gonna make any money doing it. So
Yeah.
we kind of gave up on it. Plus, you know, they need expensive work visas to play here,
Right.
which doesn't seem fair since I don't need a visa to play in Europe, but they need visas to play in the United States, and they're
Yeah.
like 2 grand, kind of expensive. Yeah.
I got a devil's advocate question, and it's just like I said, bearing in mind all the the enormous breadth of your catalog now with all your just your solo stuff, let alone the tribal tech stuff. But just say I win the lotto, and I've got $1 billion at my disposal, and I said, "Well, Scott, I'm sending you on tour, and it's going to be massive, and you can put together any band you want, like to play, just so long as you're happy getting on that stage, and you can have any textures up there you want." What do you think it would look like?
It would be my guys that I'm playing with now.
You wouldn't bring a horn section or a string section or
Well,
two keyboard players
oh
or
yeah, you know, I mean, horns would be great, you know, and a string section would be great. Oh yeah, for sure. I
that's
mean,
what I meant. Yeah, like just a dream
yeah,
setup
no,
where
absolutely. That would be amazing because who doesn't want to fill out their music with a big, you know, band? It would be amazing. When I listen to Steely Dan, you know, that's music that could easily be played by a quartet, but they also have background vocals and they have
right.
sometimes horns and all kinds of stuff going on, and it's really nice to have that luxury. And I guess they take those people out on the road, but they're making a lot more money than I do. We had a
Yeah,
horn section one time in Italy, and it was really fun. You know, they hired
brilliant.
a horn section to learn some of my tunes, and that was a blast. But yeah, that would be great. I would love that, sure. But
Oh well.
but right now, that's way out of my price range.
Well, if I win lotto, you're on. So get ready for
Okay, great. Hire
it.
Thelma Houston while you're at it, and we'll bring her
Exactly. I was
out.
going to say we'll get Thelma too. So the foundation of your whole career has been get out there, play live, get on the road. Are you okay still traveling and touring? Like, do you find it really hard these days, or
It can be. I mean, it depends. Some days are harder than others. Like, you know, sometimes we have super easy days where the van ride is only a couple hours and, you know, you do a sound check, you get plenty of time at the hotel. It's really not hard at all. But days where if you have to fly,
yeah,
that that is where it gets rough
yeah,
because just dealing with airline companies is the worst thing in the whole world. I hate it. And I hate flying and I hate airline companies
yeah,
in general because they try to rip you off for your extra luggage and they're just don't get me started on
yeah,
airline companies. You know, I hate them. So that is a real nightmare to have to fly and play. Maybe not for the pop people who are flying first class and they're only doing 3 gigs a week.
of course, yeah,
If you're having to fly on the same day that you play, which they do that these days to you, you know, they make you take a flight and then you have to play that day. My ears are messed up from the flight. My ears don't pop that easily. And you're just worn out, you know. So um that's the thing that gets me. But luckily, you know, our agent, Jeff Ogg, he opens for us on acoustic guitar. He's amazing acoustic guitar player, just incredible. And he doesn't like to drive these big long drives. So he's really good with the routing. We usually don't have any more than a 5-hour drive to the
that's
next show.
great. Wow.
So it's not that hard. It's the hardest thing probably would be the hotel beds, because when you get one of those beds that does this
Yeah.
and you wake
Yeah.
up in the morning and your back is killing you,
Oh God, yeah.
that stays with you through the whole day. So that makes it hard.
No, I suppose that's the beauty of Europe too, isn't it? Like you can route things so that it makes
Yeah.
sense physically and logistically. And
Yes.
when
Yeah.
you tour, uh, I guess you're just taking like a guitar and pedals, right? So and an
Yeah,
amp
pretty
is
much.
provided when you get
Yeah.
there.
And I have an amp and a cabinet over there that stays
Oh,
there.
great. Okay, so you've still got one of your amps and one of the
Yeah.
Sir amps and your Kerry Wright over there. So
Got my Sir SH100 and a Carry Wright 4x12 over there, and my little Fender Hot Rod Deluxe, which I put the reverb and effects through.
oh, I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah, because you're not doing loops anymore, are you? You're doing a
No,
wet dry thing, right?
I have a wet dry thing going on. Yeah,
Right.
which I really love. I love doing it that way. I think the speakers, the 4x12 responds much better and quicker when you don't have reverb and delay swimming around in the same speakers. When the reverb is separate, the amp reacts better to the pickups.
Right.
So you get everything just pops out more. You can almost tie your right hand behind your back and play with your left hand, and everything just jumps out. Because when you use an effect in your effects loop, that can bog the amp down and make it as not quite as responsive.
Where it's like trying to reproduce two sounds at the same time, sort of
Kind
things.
of, yeah, yeah.
How do you
And
how
it's
do you
nice.
split it when you do it? Well, how do you split the signal when you
It's
do that?
really easy these days because I just have this little box. I can show it to you. Oh,
That's it.
it's a Sir line box, and basically you plug from the amp into here, right, or into here, right, and out of like one of the external speaker jacks, like an extra speaker jack. Or
Yeah.
if your amp only has one speaker jack, it has a through, so you can plug into this and then back out into the cabinet,
Oh, okay.
right?
Right. Okay.
Right? Or you can just use an extra speaker jack if you have an extra speaker jack, because you know how Marshalls have a bunch of speaker jacks you're not
Yeah.
using, right? So then you come out of the other side, and now it's line level. So it turns a speaker signal into line level, and you go line level into your effect. And then you have your effect set at 100% wet, and your effect goes into the little amp, your little wet amp, which in
Brilliant.
my case can be a combo because, reverb and delay doesn't really take up that much. You don't need a big amp for that. I could probably do that
Right.
with a Blues Junior,
Right.
but I do it with a 40-watt Fender HRD Hot Rod Deluxe, and it's plenty of volume for just reverb and delay.
Yeah, you sure
And
don't want them as loud as your original signal, do you? So
yeah, and as soon as you get like 3 or 4 feet away from it, you can't tell that one sound is coming from one cabinet and one sound's coming from another cabinet. It just sounds all mixed together.
right.
But the Marshall cabinet, the 412, reacts so much. It's so much more responsive
Are
when
you
when
are,
you know.
sorry, are you using just local sound guys whenever you do the gigs or
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't really afford to hire our own guy to travel with us. So on good nights, we have great sound guys. Most of them are really good. We very rarely run into sound guys that don't know what they're doing, but it does happen. You know, one of I guess probably the biggest problem we've had with some sound guys is they're used to mixing metal, so
yeah.
they think everything is supposed to just be super bassy. So they turn up 100 hertz on the kick drum and on the bass guitar and just make everything sound like like death. And you got to tell these guys, look, man, just go up on the stage and listen to what the kick drum sounds and reproduce that sound in the house.
Yeah.
Don't add a bunch of bass to it. Same with the bass guitar, because we're not a metal band.
Right.
We just sound, we want the people to hear what we're hearing on stage.
Do you
And
still do the
sometimes they don't want to do that.
do you still do the thing with the loop pedal where you set your sound and then go out the front and listen to it?
If I have to, but now if Lena's there, Lena's really knows
Right.
tone. So
Okay.
she can be out there at the board, and if she hears something wrong, she'll tell the guy, no, don't do that.
And I
'Cause
suppose is it John, the your booking agent who opens for you on acoustic? Was it John?
Jeff
Jeff.
Og.
I suppose
Yeah.
Jeff, if he's constantly there too, he can monitor
Yeah,
what's
he's
going on
there
too.
too. Yeah. But
Yeah.
usually, I mean, if you're using a 57 and you put the mic in a good place, usually the guitar can be flat in the
Yeah.
house and it
Right.
sounds fine. Um, I don't I don't usually have to do anything to it. It usually sounds okay just flat. Um, but it depends on the room. If it's like a super bright room, then you might ask him to like cut 7K or cut 5K just so it doesn't people's
Right.
ears don't bleed.
And it's just the ever present threat of the twiddly fingers of the guy at the soundboard who wants to get creative, I guess. So
Got that risk happening. Yeah.
yeah.
You know, you never know what he's going to do. There was a funny story where I played a NAMM show one time with Jeff Berlin, and it was for Yamaha. And in the middle of the show, we looked out at we heard these sounds happening, like volumes going crazy. And we looked out at the soundboard, and the sound guy was having a fight with his wife, and his two little kids were playing with the fader.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
And we loved it. You know, it was great. It was like one of those classic moments you're never going to forget. It was awesome.
Ah, the kids are up there doing
Spinal
this.
Tap.
That's
Yeah, they're
fantastic.
just having a great time.
Oh my God. Yeah, I remember I did a gig with my friend Angus Birchall playing drums, and the guy that did sound was a metal guy. He's a like a
Mm,
that was his main thing, and it was hilarious. The whole rest of the drum kit sounded just like a drum kit, but the kick drum had that click to it, like
yeah,
a old
yeah.
Metallica record or something. So yeah,
Right, right, right. Well, you
hilarious.
get those guys sometimes. And you know, luckily we don't get too many of them because we mainly play small clubs or just
Yeah,
clubs. And you get guys that they're used to mixing all different kinds of music. So they just want to make you happy and make you sound like you want to sound.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Alan Hertz, Alan still gigging a lot, or is he sort of half
He
and half
still
to
gigs, but
engineering and
he moved to Nashville. So I would say probably now he's not playing as much as he was when he was in LA, but he still plays.
right?
And but he's got a ton of engineering work. But he came out here to mix the album. So I
Oh,
flew him out
okay,
to
right,
LA to mix. And I also flew him out here to track the album because he tracked it and mixed it.
right.
So he's the guy, man. I love his work. I just love the way he thinks about music and the way he hears music. We're just on the same page.
I,
And he's got a nice studio there, but he flew out here to track and to mix. And you know, I just count on him, man, because I'm not an engineer. I don't know shit about engineering. I know how to record my guitars, but it ends
right.
there. I don't know enough about drums to trust myself with drums and bass.
Yeah,
And Alan knows that really well, and he's a drummer, so of course he dials in the best drum tones, and he really knows. He's a reverb expert, and reverb is one of the things I know very little about. I know how to turn it off and on. That's about it.
yeah.
But he'll say, "Oh, you know, there's too much. There's, I don't want 10 milliseconds of pre-delay. I want 30 seconds of pre-delay on the reverb. Can't you hear the difference?" I'm like, "No,
I mean,
do whatever the hell you want. I have no idea."
see, I got spoiled working with TJ all the time because
There you go.
he took care of all that, and
Another guy. I mean, these guys like TJ, Mike Landau, Holdsworth, these guys are brilliant engineers as well as
amazing. Yeah,
brilliant guitar players. And I never graduated to their level, man. I'm a guitar
me
player.
neither.
I
Yeah,
know how to record my guitar, but that's where it ends, man. I don't ask me to do anything else. So
I remember we were doing
I'm glad to have Alan.
doing that Uncle Mo's record, and we were literally an hour away from taking it to get mastered. And TJ's just having one last listen to it on the multi track, and the whole mix is just screaming through the big speakers, and I'm just sitting there enjoying that. And all of a sudden, he stops and he solos like the bottom mic on the hi hat, and moves one knob like that, and then opens it up again and goes, "Yeah, that's better." And I was like, "Are you
That's
kidding me?" You know, like I mean,
yeah,
that's the
man. I
you
mean,
know,
I
like
totally hear you. And that's what the kind of stuff Alan does every day.
yeah,
And don't even know what he did.
no,
Don't even hear the difference. But he hears it, you know,
yeah.
so that's why I'm paying him because he hears stuff I don't hear, you
I
know.
know
So
TJ said that when he has the engineer hat on, he said, it's hard for me to just pick up a guitar. He said, I'm in that space, and that's why he's so good at it, because he's totally in that space of,
Yeah.
when he's
Well, I have
playing.
to say my DP chops and my mixing chops go there too. As little as I know about real mixing, but when it comes to turning knobs at the mix and getting the layers to be all sitting right together, because we have to do a lot of EQing, because sometimes Alan will say to me, Scott, you can't make all your guitars sound fat as much as you want to. You're not allowed to make all your guitars sound that fat. Some of them have to be thinned out. Otherwise, it's just going to sound like a big blob, right? And it's got to be, you've got to thin out, take some of the mid range out of some of the guitars to make them sit right in the mix. And I'm like, if it was me, I wouldn't hear that like Alan hears it. And he knows exactly which frequencies to pull out. He'll say, okay, on this one, we're pulling out 500. On this one, we're pulling out 200. On this one, we're pulling out 1,000. And he knows which frequencies to pull out to make the layers more, hearable, right? And to separate them from each other. And also, panning left and right is a big thing. And also, a lot of times he'll want to put a different reverb on one guitar than he puts on another guitar. And he'll say having a different reverb on all the different layers also helps to separate them. And this is the kind of stuff I learned from him. And this is the kind of stuff I don't think I could do by myself. I really trust Alan. He hears things that they make sense in the big picture, but I'm not going to hear it on my own probably. So yeah.
That is it, isn't it? It's the big picture mindset that makes people really good at engineering and mixing.
It is. And it's a thing that I just don't, I've never thought that I had the time to, it's too big of a learning curve for me. And I asked Mike one time, I asked Mike Landau, how the hell did you learn how to do this so well? And he said, man, I've done so many sessions, because that's what he does for a living. I mean, most of his career he spent in studios, right?
Right.
Of course, he's a great live player too. I don't mean to say he's not, but he spent a lot more time in the studio than most of us have. And he watches the engineers and just watches them work and learns from them, and with drums and everything. And now he's one of them. Like he's a real engineer. But it came from many years. And me, I go to the studio once a year, maybe once every 2 years or 3 years. I am not going to have that kind of experience, of learning experience, that some of these guys have had. I just don't have the time to become an engineer. Like I'd rather count on somebody else that knows what they're doing.
Yeah. Chris, do you have any final questions for Scott?
Look, I was going to say something ages ago, but then you guys just went into different directions. Talking ages ago about the compositions and how you were trying to write. You're trying to write things that are different. And I was going to say this kind of tongue-in-cheek comment. I think it's track 4. There's some tracks on there that really remind me of this 80s group called Tribal Tech. You might have heard of them.
Yeah, I heard of those guys. Yeah.
It had a bit of a throwback to some of the older tech stuff from the late 80s, 90s.
I
just
guess
a couple of the harmonies, and maybe it's the way, I don't know. It just
well,
really
I think
reminded
anytime you start getting more experimental with the harmony and using just basically more of it, like, every quarter note's a chord.
Yeah.
That's such a Tribal Tech thing, because since we had keyboards, and we didn't have to play this music. I mean, I would never write that kind of music for guitar because I couldn't play it. Right now, I guess I could play it more. I'm probably a better guitarist since I was back in the day, because after so many years of playing trio, I'm able to play some of these chord voicings and get from one voicing to another. I'm better at it than I used to be when I just played single lines all the time like a sax player. But still, some of this stuff would be really hard for me to play. And I don't mind telling you that some of those are overdubs. Some of that harmony, there was just no way to get from one voicing to another. So I would just play the voicing as long as it lasted and punch in for the next voicing, because there's just no physical way to get from one voicing to another. And another trick, is that a lot of my voicings are doubled with a second set of voicings, like taking a left hand piano part and adding the right hand to it.
Right.
So
Yes,
got
yes.
I've got like a 4 note chord, which or 5 note chord, which is all we can play on the guitar. And that's what I play live. But on the record, there's a much higher chord up there. Another 4 or 5 note chord up there, and it's mixed kind of like a little bit behind the other chord. So it's there and you can hear it if you listen for it. And usually they're separated hard right and hard left. And you can hear that there's two chord people playing, right? And that's one of the things that makes the song sound more realized and bigger and more pianistic.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing that, I can't do it live, but sometimes I can because if Lena's playing, then she can
Right.
play that
Yeah.
set of chords, and sometimes she does. So that's another cool thing about having another guitarist in the
Yeah.
band. When I wrote those songs with layers, she can play some of those layers with us.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This will be the
Did that
first.
answer your
This will be the.
question?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, for people out there like myself who have followed your playing right through, this particular album's got something on there. It's got a
Something
little
for
bit of a
everybody to hate.
well, it's got like a little hat tip to. It's like a journey, and there's a lot of things like because I listen to People Mover, like you would believe. I wore that CD out, so there's you can hear the progression, but just there was a couple of throwbacky things, and I was like, that
Mm-hmm.
really is reminding me of some of the text stuff. It just had the sound, it had the
Yeah,
arrangement and the thickness of the
I think
harmonies.
sometimes I have to rein myself in sometimes. It's probably all composers do, because sometimes when you're writing in what I would call like slow motion time, you're not writing in real time, but everything's just, it's sort of like doing a claymation movie where you're just moving the guy's arm this far,
Yep.
and then you make the next move and you move it again this far. But then, of course, when it's real time, it doesn't look anything like that. But in stop time, and when you're dealing in stop time, sometimes it's very tempting to throw more in than you need, throw more chords in than you need. And I listen to it in real time and I go, this sounds confusing, like it's too much. And I have to pull some of that out to, because it sounds sort of like chaos, too much chaos, right?
Mm.
And I have to thin it out a little bit because I don't want it to be so difficult to listen to that it's not fun to listen to. On the other hand, I have to say that one of my favorite composers, Wayne Shorter, I mean, there's a lot of harmony in that music. And I remember the first time I heard Atlantis, which is one of my favorite Wayne Shorter albums, I didn't like it that much. I thought, what is he doing? There's so many goddamn chords. And I felt a little confused. But as I started listening to it more and more and learning it, it became one of my very favorite albums of all time. But I didn't feel that way the first time I heard it. Same thing with Birds of Fire, Mob Visual Orchestra. When first time I heard Birds of Fire, it sounded very dissonant to me, and I wasn't ready for it. And I was just like, this is so more dissonant than anything that I've been listening to. But I stuck with it, and now it's one of my favorite records. So
Mm.
things are an acquired taste. You know what Richie Blackmore said about that record? In
Birds
a
of
guitar
Fire.
player interview, it was awesome. He asked him, "What do you have you ever heard Birds of Fire?" And Richie Blackmore said, "Yeah, that if I ever go to hell, that's the kind of music I would expect to hear there."
Oh god.
And I thought that was what an
Oh
awesome
God.
quote,
Oh
you know?
Jesus. Oh, it's fantastic. That's so
Yeah,
Richie.
it's
Yeah, Richie's
great.
very
Yeah, I
open
mean,
to lots of
Just
other
can't
things.
make up something like that. It's a great quote.
oh my God.
But yeah, so I'm expecting, like, some people when they hear my records, they may not like it the first time they hear it, especially the more dense tunes with lots of chords. But if they listen more than once, they may grow to like it, hopefully.
I went through that experience when I, read about Alan Holdsworth in a Eddie Van Halen interview when I was probably 17 or something,
Yeah.
and Eddie said you've got to hear. He mentioned the UK album, and he mentioned
Right.
the One of a Kind by Bruford. And I got the
Right.
UK album first, and I'd never heard music like that before.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I was I was enthralled with Alan's playing, obviously, right off the bat. But as far as the tunes went, I was just like, I'm not quite sure how I feel about this. And by
Me too.
the sixth listen, favorite Desert Island disc. You know what I mean? It was one of my
Yeah,
favorite
no, me
albums of
too.
all
I,
time.
I thought the same thing when I heard Alan playing with other people. I always dug it because he played great solos. But when I first heard Alan's own music with all the chords, and all the harmony, I was just like, I don't know if I like this or not. But then some tunes I just grew to really love.
Yeah,
You know, so, some tunes I still didn't get attracted to, but some tunes just really like, wow, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
just really great writing. And of course, nobody likes 100% of any artist. I don't like 100% of Wayne's music, though. Even Wayne's one of my favorite composers. But, I'd have to put him on the pretty top of the list as one of the guys I like the most. And Zawinul as well. Pastorius, Jocko is a great composer. Schofield has composed some really nice music. So has Matheny. So has McLaughlin. Uh, so is Charles Mingus. You know, and of course, guys like John Williams and some of the classical guys like Bartok and Debussy and Ravel. And I've also transcribed a lot of that music. And there's just so many incredible composers out there to learn from.
yeah.
And I've only scratched the surface, with all these guys that have come before me. I just hope that my music is worthy someday to be included of like somebody says, yeah, that guy can write pretty good shit.
It's already there, Scott. I think
I
on this
hope
I think on
so.
this album especially,
Um,
you've just managed to create that perfect blend of the complex harmony, but at the same time, just it's so relatably beautiful. The melodies and all and then the excitement of all
hope.
the solos and everything. Man, it's got it all. It's
I hope. Well, I
one of the
appreciate
greats.
that, and I'm glad I from you. That's a really big compliment because I know you're a great musician, and I really appreciate you saying that. Um, I
Oh,
don't know,
Chris feels the same
some
way too. I know. So.
people will listen to it and not like the complexity of it and not want to hear it again. But people who are not afraid for music to challenge them, they might give it a second listen and a third listen and grow to like some of the stuff that's a little more complex. And like you said, there is some stuff on the record that's just one key, one chord grooves, nothing
Yeah,
fancy,
yeah,
right? Because I love that kind of music too.
right.
And I'm not hung up on me. I love Led Zeppelin and Stevie Ray and AC/DC and I like everything.
In terms of all the young players, like like especially the rock guys, like because I'm one of them. Like I mean, when I first heard you all the way back
You're
in
not young.
yeah, I know. I'm definitely not young, but I'm a rock guy.
He
You
is a
say,
young
Scott,
guy,
you
Yeah,
Scott.
dick.
I should definitely qualify that.
These young kids,
Sorry to be such a dick, but you're as old as me.
you know,
60 years young, yeah.
these young
But
kids.
well, actually, I was just talking to Chris about Rick Beato. Just did an interview with Matteo Mancuso, and he mentioned,
Mateo, great
yeah,
player. Yeah, he's
he
a good
mentioned
player.
you, and I thought this is brilliant because that's the sort of we need more of the younger guys to hear about you because
It's amazing. I mean, that
um,
technique with his right hand is incredible.
it's wild, isn't it? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
wow. I
incredible.
mean, and so many young guys coming up, God damn you kids, get out of my yard.
I know, get off my
Yeah, yeah.
lawn, yeah. But
So
no,
young.
it's just, like
He's a
you
badass.
you've
Yeah.
played a pivotal role in bridging that gap for rock players like me and jazz musicians because you straddle both those worlds so easily, and it's really fantastic to see that you're still putting out amazing stuff like this because the young players are going to be jumping on it, I tell you. So
I hope they are inspired by it more than just paying tribute to it. I hope they're inspired by it and they make
no,
their own.
I just want to
well,
say, Scott, one day we have to get you over here to the land of Oz.
yeah,
I've been trying to come back for a long time, man. It's just difficult.
I
The
get it.
next time we're able to come to Japan, which I hope maybe 2025, we'll try. We
yeah.
will really work hard on trying to get there.
Well, we're going to plug this album and make it a hit, and we're going to make sure that everyone in Australia wants you to come out here. So
I'm
and
just
Oh,
telling
spread
man.
the
all my
word. So
students you have
Listen,
to buy a copy of the CD or no lessons.
Well, no, guys, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it because
Oh
this
man,
music is not mainstream, so every bit of press helps, and I really appreciate you doing this for me.
well,
It,
we
it means a
appreciate
lot.
you. We
Thank you.
appreciate you making it because it's a massive achievement. So Karnevel comes out on February
Second,
2nd.
Second, yeah.
February the 2nd. All right.
yeah,
So
2
You can
weeks.
pre-order from the website now. I'm going to go do that.
yeah,
Thank you so much, you guys.
awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Scott.
Scott.
Okay,
All right, man.
cheers.
See ya.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.